And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
What?
Yes, you should have never started it.
Do you ever feel like you're living in a parallel universe?
We have an ocean in between.
Well, this is the story, the real story, of how the war in Ukraine started. And how it came to be that an American president repeated and swallowed lines in Mar-a-Lago that were made up in Moscow.
Ukrainian President Zelenskyy today accusing President Trump of living in what he calls a Russian-made disinformation space.
First, a very basic fact check. This war did not start with Ukraine. Ukraine did not invade itself. This war could be over tomorrow, today, by the time you're watching this, if Vladimir Putin chose to withdraw Russian troops from Ukraine. He invaded, he is the sole aggressor. So did this just come out of nowhere, this war? Well, no, of course it didn't. It emerged primarily because Vladimir Putin could not deal with a very simple fact, a fact which perpetually fries his brain. He cannot deal with the fact that countries like Ukraine came to have the right to determine their own destinies, whether they were part of the Russian or European clubs. After the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the countries which became independent but which were once part of the USSR, like Poland or the Baltic states or Ukraine, gradually decided via democratic elections to join the EU or NATO or both. When it became clear that Ukraine similarly was going to go down this route, Putin decided to act because, as I say, he just couldn't deal with it. He decided to annex Crimea in 2014 and then to try and topple the government overall via fully fledged invasion at the start of 2022, 3 years ago. That is what this war is about. The right of these countries, which have long been dominated by Russia, to choose their own futures. And since then, we fast forward to today and see Donald Trump mirroring Kremlin talking points, their own warped version of that history.
And no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way.
This was mirrored by Trump's little helper, Elon Musk, who tweeted, "Given that we're supposed to be defending democracy, there should be a democracy." None of that mentions, of course, that there hasn't been a free and fair election in Russia in years, if not decades. And it doesn't mention the fact that there would have been a presidential election in Ukraine by now if Russia had never invaded. What Putin wants to do, again, now being aided by Donald Trump, is to have an election he can try and manipulate, something he has done many times before, including in Georgia, something we've reported on ourselves on the news agents.
Glory to Georgia, fuck Russia.
And then there was Vice President J.D. Vance coming to Western Europe to tell Western Europe that the biggest threat to Western European security
is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor.
But, well, Western Europe.
And what I worry about is the threat from within.
So why is Trump and Vance and the rest of them making these points? Why are they mirroring what the Kremlin is saying? Well, I think there are a few key reasons. One is the MAGA misinformation ecosystem. On this, Zelenskyy is right.
Жаль, президент Трамп з великою повагою до нього відносимося як до лідера народу, який ми дуже поважаємо, американський народ, який нас постійно підтримує. На жаль, живе в цьому дезінформаційному просторі.
There has been a radicalization of information in the US, particularly among MAGA people. Trump and others see this stuff and they believe it. They are radicalized sometimes by their own bullshit. Second, ideas. Part of this is ideational. Trump and the people around Trump like the fact that Putin is an autocrat. They like the fact that he's a traditionalist. They like the fact that he's not a liberal European cosmopolitan. They see him and his regime as being on their side in the international culture war. That is why they laud someone like Putin, or say the hard right, far right, AfD in Germany, at the same time as chastising and insulting their liberal democratic allies. 3. Commercial. Trump and his people have been quite brazen, quite open about this. They have been clear that they see a lot of commercial, financial opportunities for the normalization of relations between the US and Russia. A normalization that financially, ultimately, would likely benefit people like them. And 4, geopolitics. There is a bigger game going on here. Henry Kissinger, that infamous US Secretary of State, once said that the aim of US foreign policy should be to try and avoid a Russia-China axis from emerging. So what is Trump doing? I think he's acting on that maxim and creating a US-Russia axis instead. Ultimately, they don't think that Russia is a threat to the United States, like China is. Putin is the leader of a militarily and economically exhausted country, whereas we know that Trump has been obsessed with China's rise for decades. They think that by allying with Russia, by cleaving it away from its Chinese paymasters, they can win the great strategic competition of the 21st century, not between the US and Russia and democracies and autocracies, but between the US and the Chinese Communist Party. As a result of all of these things together, we are seeing the emergence of a new set of realities in geopolitics. The implications of a Russia-US axis could be staggering for Europe. It could be the defining moment of the next 4 years and beyond.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.